What is going on, guys? Politics Gaming here, and today I am doing a brand new economic tutorial for Power and Revolution. This can also be used for Ruler of Nations and Masters of the World. This is going to be a basic, while detailed economic tutorial for Geopolitical Simulator. So just before we start, I want to go ahead and tell you guys to like and subscribe. Go support me on Patreon, whatever. Basic things you always hear from every other YouTuber. However, I'm going to go ahead, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start this economic tutorial. First off, we're going to start off with taxes. I actually made an entire script for this, so it's going to be the first time I've actually done something like this. Okay, so first off, we're going to start off with taxes. Taxes is one of the very important incomes other than trade. There are many different kinds of taxes, such as income tax, inheritance tax, the gun tax, airline tax, the payroll tax, which is employee social security, employer, blah blah blah, and then the company tax. Changing tax is a very delicate thing to do, and in a democratic state, to increase the tax is actually very unpopular. So you should only do it by about 0.2 to maybe a quarter of a percent. Probably every month. However, creating new taxes can also be supported by your parliament or Congress, since I am playing the United States. So in other states, you can probably change the tax by 0.5% at a time, making the transitions easier. Two of the most important taxes are income tax and a value-added tax. The United States does not have a federal value-added tax. However, you can create one. With a 2.6% budget deficit, this is the easiest way to get out of a deficit. It creates about a 1 to 2%, maybe 3% surplus. So creating a federal value-added tax is the easiest thing that you can actually do as playing as the United States. You can come over here and put it to 5%. This is very supported. This is supported by Congress in the game, and it will generate $1.4 trillion of federal money. So again, this is the easiest way. However, I'm not going to institute it. A lot of these things I'm talking about, I'm not going to institute. And so yeah, value-added tax, very easy. So then you should try to balance your taxes in accordance to the political orientation of your country. That is, a social or leftist countries impose taxes which promote equality on their people's income. So you coming over to here, a socialist or leftist sort of thing would be basically having like the high bracket at 50%, the middle bracket maybe 25%, 30%, and the low bracket at a very low amount. So, and then, if you're playing like a right-leaning or conservative rightist country, then, creating a tax with low income taxes for the rich and middle class is actually very popular and will make your party like you. So that is something that is very supported by a lot of those countries. And it always depends on what your political orientation is. Both your political orientation and the orientation of your party. So when you start a new game, the number one thing actually that you should do is to check inflation. The United States has a 1.29% inflation rate. Inflation is a very, very important thing in the game, especially if you actually have seen my previous series, such as Iran. I had to deal with inflation a lot, and you can see how important dealing with inflation is. So that is an example. When you're starting a new game, just check inflation. If it is too high, you will need to increase the interest rate to get that inflation down. And if it's too low, you will have to lower the rate. Basically, like if it's too low, then allowing more money to flow into the economy and lowering interest rates on mortgages, bank loans and stuff like that. That's basically what the interest rate is. The interest rate is basically the interest rate that the federal government institutes on how much money is being borrowed by people inside of the country, such as banks, people, mortgage loaners, stuff like that. As a way, my source says it. Inflation is like a wild horse trying to run away, so you need to check it often and counter it with changes in the interest rate. However, the interest rate is not the only way to control this. You can actually come over here to taxes and actually come over here to legislation and then change the level of tax investigation to regular and repressive, weak and tolerant, regular and repressive, and frequent and very repressive. For a high interest rate, coming here and changing it to frequent and very repressive will make sure that your tax investigators are actually getting all the money that they can get from companies and people. So you're not missing. So people they're gonna be making sure that your people are actually paying their taxes. However, a weak and tolerant policy will basically just say, okay, well, we're really tolerant on the amount of people, and then we allow for like people to have their IRS debt be wiped away. This is all like from a U.S. point of view. This is not from like a French, Canadian, or British. So that's enough about inflation. We're actually just finishing off on inflation. So this is going to be talking about the budget. So we're going to go over here to budget. So basically, the budget is how much you are spending. So right here, this is the amount of money that we're actually spending, $3.7 trillion. So $835 billion of that is actually going into health, and then $785 billion is actually going into Social Security. Both of these are actually accounted for in the same thing. So health, family, and Social Security welfare and spending is actually accounted for 42.8% of this. This is about a 100% chart. So, like, if you want to look at it from a money standpoint, 42 cents to the dollar is actually being spent on health, family, and Social Security. 10 cents is actually being spent on debt reimbursement. 20 cents is actually being spent on defense. And then 7 cents is being spent on education, culture, sport, and research. From what I know, from what you see right here, the health, family, Social Security, whatever is counted into that ministry depends from country to country, because I've seen it different. It actually, in Japan, if you play Japan, it actually is like health, family, Social Security, employment, social, and the sorts of like that. So it does depend from country to country. So if you look over here, this is what is called a budget surplus or budget deficit. This is a deficit right here that we have. We have a 2.6% budget deficit. So that means that, and this is of the GDP. So our deficit is 2.6% of the US GDP. So we're spending $3.7 trillion on like agriculture, culture, debt reimbursement, defense, stuff like that, and then how much we're making from off of taxes is actually $3.2 trillion, and we're also making that money off of trade as well. So, I think that would be enough from that, and I'm gonna go in more into detail about it in a second. One good way to actually cut expenses, like I said again, or to raise revenue, is to increase the taxes. This is not popular among the people. However, it is popular in the party. So again, like getting rid of that deficit, you can actually increase the value-added taxes in the United States. Or if you're playing another country such as Russia, cutting the conscription would actually save you about $17 billion and would actually cut your deficit by about 1 or 2%, in my experience. So other than that, we're going to go ahead and come over here to our sectors. So a good way to develop these sectors is to actually subsidize them. A subsidy is basically the state giving, like if we wanted to come over here and grow the Apple industry, we can come over here and give them uh, $500 million in subsidies. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that. And basically, again, it is the state giving money to that sector to help them hire more people, to give them probably more seeds to plant apples with, stuff like that. It also helps you battle the trade balance, and it increases your production depending on what kind of resources you're actually trying to produce. And I'll go into detail of that in a second. So this is something that you can actually do to help your agricultural industry. Go over to industry and then come all the way down to water supply networks and exonerate that. An exoneration, it gives you information right here. An exoneration is basically a public authority gives tax and social contribution exemptions to help sectors experiencing financial difficulties. Exonerating the water supply network actually helps your farming industry, because if you come over here, every single one of these need water supply networks. That is how the agricultural industry runs. If you don't have water supply networks, then you need uh, to develop that. And you can develop it because it is not a primary industry, and I'll go into detail of that in a second. I'm going to go ahead and put a list right here. This list basically shows you what agriculture needs, which sector needs what in each and every sector. This is a piece of information that I took off of the wiki, which I will give you a link to that in the description. And is so this is all the information you need to know what industry needs what in the agriculture industry. And once I get into industry, into the industrial tab, I will show you that for what they need. And there's a lot of other things that you need. So here's so I'm gonna go over this, and I'm gonna show you guys what everything means. So let's go to automobile construction. Okay, so production and consumption percentage worldwide is basically self-explanatory. This is the amount of production that your country is holding of automobile construction in the world. So the United States accounts for 6.298% of the world's production of automobiles. And then consumption, we produce 26.4% of the world's cars. Okay, so the trade balance right here. The trade balance is a production minus consumption in millions, billions, or even trillions of dollars. So right here we have a negative $1.1 trillion trade deficit in automobiles. So that means that, and you can see it right here, is that we have a near 20% difference in the production and consumption of that. So again, trade balance is production minus consumption, and that comes out to a negative in dollar form or currency form, whatever currency you are using. So it varies from country to country depending on what kind of currency you're looking at. So coming here, sales is the profit, or is production that is money in sales. So off of sales, we're making $168 billion in sales. However, profits is basically the total profits after the sale. So whenever, if you need an example of this, profits is basically after construction, after tax, after the sale of the vehicle, and then after every single tax that it has to go through. I believe automobile construction reducing the vehicle registration tax would actually help this. But yeah, and so we're only making $1.4 billion in profits off of automobile construction. So then going over to productivity index. So basically this is how good you are at production, how many And then so this is not accurate to the game. However, this is just basically saying how. So this is what I have for productivity index. How many cars you can produce in an hour, and how many cars you could produce in an hour. So basically, again, it is how good at production of this product that you are basically allowing yourself to have. And developing that sector can actually increase the productivity index of that. Okay, and then coming over to income tax, and then that is how much of the percent of revenue that you're making off of the sale of this product in relation to your state revenue. So it's only like 3%, nearly 4% of a percent of our income. So it's only 0.03% of our income of our state revenue overall. So, and then coming over to sale and going down, actually, we see employment. This is basically the percent of the population, of the working population that is working in this industry. So only 0.5% of the population of the United States is working in here. And then we come over here. This is in numerical form, manpower. So we have 1.08 million people working in this sector. And then coming down, we see sell price. This is in thousands of dollars per unit. So the sale price of a one vehicle is $39,000. And this is used in trade, by the way. So sale price is how much we're going to be selling it for. And then coming down, you see purchase price. This is basically how much a country has to pay to buy it from us. So again, sale price is how much you are going to be selling it for. Purchase price is how much a country has to pay to buy one vehicle from you. And then so coming down again, we see price, which is including tax. So this is after like vehicle registration tax. This is after state and local taxes, stuff like that. This is after taxes, and it's usually similar to your purchase price from what it looks like. Technological level, there's nothing that can really, I don't think, can change this. Actually, yeah, technological level is 1 out of 3 stars. This can be increased whenever you make a technological advancement. So coming over to research, I'm going to go over to the research tree. Coming over to energy and environment, this can actually be increased whenever you discover things such as the high power fuel battery, which is a fuel cell system based on a new metal alloy that is used in hydrogen motors that are cleaner and more powerful. And then basically this increases the production and sales and profits actually of your so like here it improves the following activities of utility vehicle construction, automobile construction, and aeronautical construction. So it technological advancements actually helps you a lot in those kind of sectors. So coming back to automobile construction, so we have several options of what we can do with these things. First, we have lift to total embargo on a country. Basically, what this is you can come over to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and we can stop the sale of this product. So we can ban the ability of us to sell this product to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which apparently we already are embargoing the Democratic Republic of 11 sectors already. So we can do this. However, I haven't tried it on a country that already has sectors being banned from them. However, if I were to try it on a country such as Russia, if I wanted to put an embargo of vehicles on Russia, then they would file a complaint. They would formally file a complaint with the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization would come back to you and threaten to put sanctions on you if you do not alleviate those sanctions that you just put on Russia. So, these are only allowed whenever you go to the United Nations and then put Something such as, like, come over here. If you were to provide proof that a nation is a threat to international security, or denounce a nation. Oh, this is denouncing. So provide proof that a nation is a threat to international security, and you have proof against a country such as Argentina, for example. And if they were producing like nuclear weapons or something like that, then if you do that, then it allows you to put sanctions on them, and you can sanction them for whatever. So coming back to automobile construction, we have subsidies. I've already explained what subsidies are. Again, it's just state money that you can give to that sector to help them grow, and it usually helps them find more employees. Custom duties is basically tariffs. It is a tax paid on imported merchandise as it crosses the border, and the World Trade Organization really, really hates it. However, you can put a tariff of at least 7% total. This is total. You can put a tariff of at least 7% total across your entire economy. So right here, what I would suggest, whatever thing you want to produce, come over here and then go to custom duties, put a 5% tariff on it. That is what I usually do. However, if you want to grow this industry, do not put a tariff on it, because tariffs basically allow, it puts a tax on it, and it discourages people from buying imported, like for example, imported automobiles. But it really does hurt your sales of that product, and it's not going to allow you to develop it as easily. So but something you should actually do, come over to like naval construction and put a tariff on that. That would be easier. However, I am not encouraging or discouraging the use of tariffs. I'm still not familiar with what tariffs really do, and I will have to do more research on that. Other than that, that is what a tariff is. So then we come over to exonerate. I've already explained this. Again, exoneration is basically the state exempting that sector from state and federal taxes. Impose a price reduction. This is basically this is only for like agriculture and like singular sorts of things. This is like thousands of units. I cannot do a price reduction for vehicles, automobile construction. However, for things such as bottled water, then I can actually do that. So I think it's for things such as agriculture. You can definitely do it for agriculture. Bottled water you can do. Clothing you can definitely do. And so this is in millions of dollars. So I can reduce it by about $1 million. And this basically promotes purchasing power for your country. So people would be able to basically afford that kind of product. So, and then coming over to like here, you can do it for consumer products. So stuff like that. Iron, you cannot do it for, obviously. But things such as paper, stuff like that, those are the things that you can actually change the purchase price for. Okay, so and then again, like I said earlier, come over here and exonerate that so you can help out your agricultural industry. Okay, so so that's enough from stuff like that. And so what I want to get on to next is actually stuff that you cannot produce if you do not have the production at the beginning of the game. So there are various industries that you cannot start up if you do not have previous production of it, again, at the beginning of the game. This includes bauxite, uranium, zinc, diamonds, rare earth oxides, gold, lead, coal, iron, and wood. These are known as primary industries, which means that actually includes mining, fishing, and anything that uses raw materials. Or if you're trying to produce raw materials and you do not have the production of it, you cannot produce it. So again, like if I wanted to come over here to bauxite, if I wanted to produce bauxite, I can't produce bauxite because I do not have the production of bauxite. You can try to subsidize it. I may be wrong here, but from what I know, raw materials cannot be produced if you do not have the production of it. So if it has that X right there, there's no production of it and you cannot make it. The ones that I know you cannot produce are diamonds, nickel. Nickel is another one. Rare earth oxides, like for countries such as I don't know, Iran, China, maybe. They do not actually. You can actually come over here to World Info. So countries such as the United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, Ukraine, Uganda, Turkmenistan, they do not have production of it, so they cannot produce rare earth oxides. However, countries who do produce it, they can actually expand on it, but you will end up using those resources in the future, I believe. And your production will slowly start to go down because you are producing more and more of that product and you're not able to do that. This also does mess with other industries. So coming up, if you go to aluminum, not aircraft carrier, aluminum, and you go to sector infos, so basically, and I'm going to go ahead and put up a picture of this in a second. This is basically the dependencies of what industry needs what. And I'll put a link to those pictures in the description, but I'll put it up on the screen now. So coming over to aluminum, if you see it right now, so we need bauxite, water supply networks, and electricity to actually produce aluminum. And you need electricity to actually produce a lot of industrial products. So aluminum needs bauxite, and if you don't have bauxite, then you need to import that kind of product to produce it. So I think that would be enough from talking about industry and stuff like that. So coming over the trade, the basic thing about trade is that if I wanted to trade something with Canada, I'm not going to trade with Canada. If you're playing in the United States and you want to trade with Canada, Canada is a horrible trading partner. So if I wanted to sell automobiles to Canada, okay, so that's purchase. If I wanted to sell, let's say, 1.2 million units of cars to Canada, their purchase price is $26,000 per unit. Our sale price is $39,000. So the purchase price basically is how much a country wants to buy, how much they wanted to use to buy. And then the sale price is how much you are supposed to sell it for. So a good contract is getting that above your sale price. So if I wanted to get a good contract, I would want to sell that for maybe 40, 45,000, maybe 50,000. But as the United States, you're never going to find a country that has a higher sale price than you. So that's the unfortunate thing about playing in the United States. You're never really going to get a good contract with any other country. However, playing something such as like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and a country that actually has the production of those things, it's actually very easy to make a good contract, because basically what you're trying to get is the profits to be higher than that. So like if I were to do this contract with Canada, and I were to sell vehicles to them for $51,000, that's about an $11,000 profit that I'm making each vehicle. So right here, this would be cut in half. That's the profit that you would be getting, which would be $30 billion in profits you'd be getting off of that. Give or take about $10 billion. I don't, but from what I know, so this is the math right here. So you're selling it for $51,000, for 1.2 million units. of vehicles, and then so the profit is $11,000. So basically, that would be the right here. Your profit would basically be in between maybe 15 to 30 billion dollars is gonna be your profit. Um, all right. So next up, we're gonna be talking about debt. Basically, debt is a great burden for almost every single state. It could be useful in the short term, but on the long term, it could ruin your budget if you are mismanaging your debt. Every time you don't have money in your coffers, you can borrow money that you have to pay back plus the interest of that debt. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the debt tab and list it from current loans. So you borrow or pay back your loans every 3 months, which is known as a quarter. So, and at the debt is paid back depends on your GDP. The higher it is, the higher is the expense under debt reimbursement. So when you open a tab, you'll see server data almost everywhere, blah, blah, blah. So, so I'm going to go ahead and start talking about it right here instead of reading. So basically, debt is how much money you owe as a sovereign state. So I've already talked about budget deficit, but I'm going to talk about public debt. What we're talking about in public debt is basically, and this can actually be found under budget, which shows your public debt and your public debt as percentage of GDP. So whatever the GDP of your country is, which is basically the total amount of stuff that you produce. Your public debt is how much money you have borrowed in previous years plus the interest of that debt. So coming over to public debt for the United States, we owe our creditors $20.3 trillion of debt. This can be paid off by getting a surplus, or this can also be paid off by not initiating in major projects such as highways, trains, construction projects for energy projects, stuff like that. And then so public debt as percentage of GDP is basically the public debt in comparison to your GDP. So the public debt of the United States is 104% of the GDP. So my GDP is like, my GDP is 19.3 trillion, and my public debt is 20.3 trillion. So it's more than my entire debt. So that is my public debt. And then so coming back to my debt agencies, basically, this is the amount of debt that I owe to every country. I owe China the most, which is 1.9, nearly $2 trillion is how much I owe China. And then I owe Japan 1.5 trillion, and then I owe France, Canada, India, all of them over $500 billion. And then so that's the amount of money that you owe these countries that are lending you money to use to pay for the amount of projects that you're actually doing. And it also doesn't matter on the projects. You could literally do nothing for an entire quarter and you'd still have to borrow money depending on your budget deficit. So what we see here is that it shows the next quarterly loan date. So from what our creditors are projecting, the next quarterly loan is going to be nearly $100 billion. This can be giving or taking however much money you have used in the previous quarter. But this goes up and down depending on what you're doing. So basically, you have several agencies that you have. So you have Grumpies, you have Harshness and Rules, you have Kish ratings, and you have Key Gong. So these all give you credit ratings for the for debt that you've actually been paying back, depending on whether you've been privatizing or something like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and list them, and I think I'm gonna put a picture up right now. Grumpies, the first one, is the American agency. There's two American agencies. There's the British one, and then there's a Chinese one. Grumpy's is basically looking at your growth rate to see their credit toward you is actually how good your growth rate has been. Harshness and rules, there's no third factor. It's basically on your budget deficit and your debt. And then quiche ratings is basically they go off of the um, strength of your national currency. So like they go off of how much the dollar is actually worth and your inflation rate and stuff like that. And then Qigong is about operating expenses for your public services. So coming over to here, Qigong really loves it whenever I nationalize, and it also loves it whenever I um, put more effort into the amount of people that I have and the amount of salary that I'm actually putting into public services and public sectors and stuff like that. So Qigong is always going to be about your public service sectors. So coming over, so lastly, I'm really just going to talk about energy. And me and my friend actually like had a lot of fun trying to do all this. So coming over to energy, basically energy is how much energy your country is producing. This can talk about coal, oil, natural gas, and electricity production. It's always going to be about electricity production. So right here, this is the breakdown of my electric production in the United States. So 73.1% of my country's electricity is coming from fossil fuel energy. So fossil fuels is basically coal, natural gas, and oil. And then 8.1% of my electricity production is coming from nuclear energy. 7.4 is coming from hydraulic, which is basically dams. Wind powered produces 6.7%. Solar is 1.3%. Geothermal is 1.1%, and biomass is 2.3%. So I'm going to go over to activities. And so basically, from what we gathered, energy independence is basically a goal that you really want to go for in every country that you have. Electric production. So I'm going to come over here. Electric production always has to be above your national consumption because national consumption is always going up and down. Mostly it's going up, especially whenever you give more money to your industry sector, and that needs more electricity. So any sector that you actually subsidize and help out and want to grow, and if that sector needs electricity to run, then it requires more electricity. So your national consumption of electricity is always going up or down. So, once you actually do that, you can call yourself semi-energy independent. To be truly energy independent, you need to control the production of the base material. If you have coal energy, you need to produce enough proper coal. So coming over to here, the production of these, fossil energy accounts for 2,300 terawatts, and I have 116,000 fossil energy plants. So if I want to come over here and produce them, then I'm not going to be able to produce anything off of that if I don't have the coal, oil, or natural gas to produce it with. And same thing with things such as biomass and nuclear, because in nuclear I need uranium. And if this is one of the primary sectors that you need to mine to get it, is actually with uranium, you need to mine it. So you need to produce that. And so that's something that you actually need to produce enough energy for electric. And I think it actually depends on your uranium production, is how it affects your nuclear electricity production. So coming down, solar from what we gathered from our research, solar is one of the better per cost, even if nuclear produces more than absolute numbers. So what that basically means is that solar power produces more terawatts in your electricity production for the cheapest price. However, nuclear electricity produces the most terawatts of power for one facility only. So I'm going to put it up right now, the energy productions that you need to produce 1 terawatt with each of these facilities. And I'm going to put it up right now. And other than that, honestly, after energy, I don't think there's really anything else that I can actually talk about. If you have any questions for that, please put it in the comments below. Guys, if you like this economic tutorial, please like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Go support me on Patreon, and comment what you think about my revised economic tutorial. Other than that, guys, again, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next Power and Revolution video that I produce. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.